You're listening to the Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Golseth.
It is Missionary Monday.
It is Missionary Monday.
And excited to share the story of one of our missionaries who has been serving in the Czech Republic, and get to learn more about her. Sarah Harms in studio with us today. Sarah, two Sarahs. I'm outnumbered.
I know, finally. And we both have an H.
We've been planning it all along.
Right?
That's right. To take over the studio.
I mean, sure.
And most of the world, so, you know.
Glad to have you here today. We always love sharing the stories of missionaries and those who have been serving around the world, serving the Lord in various ways, whether it's through preaching or teaching or leading volunteers, organizing volunteers, educating, teaching English as a second language. So what ways have you been given to serving in the Czech Republic?
Yeah, so for the last couple of years, I was serving over there, working with the Lutheran Czech Church, and we were primarily doing church planting. And so what that looks like is a lot of community outreach, a lot of connecting with local congregations, getting ministries and Bible studies and youth groups started. So a big part of my job was actually going to high schools and teaching English kind of by day, and then doing kind of youth ministry by night, which, you know, doesn't leave a lot of time for things like sleeping and eating, but who needs those things? So I would teach at a couple different high schools and connect with the youth. And then we had like an English talk group ministry that looks something like an American youth group, where we go and we have some kind of a gospel presentation. We play games. We have devotions, and we also have an English segment for kids who are there to kind of help improve their English. And then the goal is to be able to connect those kids with the local church body.
Yeah. What was it like teaching young people about Jesus, about the gospel? Was it something that they were familiar with, or was this just a totally new concept to them?
It really depended on the kid, depended on the town or the village. Historically, that area has had a lot of different people kind of oppressing it, and for many, many years they were under communism, and so for a lot of the older generations, they don't want to talk about religion. They don't want to talk about Christ or Christianity. Younger people, they're usually a bit more open. They don't tend to have a lot, at least in my experience, don't have a lot of kind of preset opinions about things. They see churches, but it's much more of kind of a historical, almost like this is a museum. This is something that's a part of our past. Mm-hmm. So really bringing Christ to them and, you know, kind of bringing the gospel to life in a sense is something that was really cool to see. Going over there, especially working as a single woman, was really strange for them, especially out in more kind of remote towns. I had a lot of young girls who would ask me things like, well, why are you here? And why aren't you living with your family somewhere? And, you know, what's so important about you being here? Which really then opened doorways to do a lot of, you know, mentorship and talk to people about Christ and explain the importance of that. And so that was something that was really cool for me to see in a kind of unexpected way that I was able to serve. That was great. Yeah.
What are some other things that you learned about the Czech culture while you were there that was that was new to you, or you know, things that you learned more about them that helped you grow so that you could relate to them as well?
I think the Czech people, there's kind of this saying that was developed, I mean, not by me by any means, but that people would talk about how the Czechs are like coconuts and the Americans are like peaches. And what they meant by that was that Americans tend to be very friendly and outgoing and kind of like this sweet, fluffy outer exterior. And once you get through all of that, you get to like the core and the pit of like the really, you know, the things that they hold near and dear and principles and things like that. But then the Czechs, on the outside, they're very rough and tough. And it takes a lot of work to get down into the inside and into like the soft, you know, kind, compassionate parts. Mm-hmm. And I found that really to be true, in the sense that you get to know people and at first you feel like, man, everyone here hates me, you know, but it's really not the case. They just have a very different way of presenting themselves than Americans do. But once you kind of get through that hard exterior and you get to know them, you're really honestly going to have a friend for life that's going to do anything for you. And really being able to connect with them in that way was really awesome. But yeah, it's definitely an opposites when it comes to two cultures. So it's hard to kind of get in there and realize, for them to realize that you're sincere because you seem to be just as friendly to everyone. Mm-hmm. But then it's hard for you to see that people do actually care about you. It's just going to take longer to get to that point. So I think that's something that was a huge learning curve for me.
How did that affect how you were able to build relationships with people?
At first, there was a lot of kind of the American smile and nod, where you're like, all right, I'll kill him with kindness, and you just think, maybe I'm, doing something to offend them. I don't know. Working with them, something that I found out after a while, after some kind person told me, was that, you'll have like a meeting that's like at a scheduled time, but then afterwards, and you feel like nothing happened in that meeting, and you're like, why did I come here? What am I doing? And then people will say things like, okay, well, if you want, we're all going to go out for lunch and you can come. And here I'm thinking kind of this American mentality of, I've got to accomplish, 100 things today, so I'm going to head out. See you next time. And I wouldn't stay for these things like the afterwards coffee, or I wouldn't go out for lunch or whatever, thinking it was just like that's something for them and not me. And then finally someone told me, and Czechs are wondrously blunt. They're like, everyone thinks that you hate them. And I was like, what? Like, all I do is smile and be nice. And they're like, well, you never come to anything. And so basically there's the meeting, and then there's the real meeting where the actual business happens over, lunch or a drink or coffee or whatever. And so once they told me, you really need to start coming to these things, people thought like, oh, now she's finally giving us the time of day. And so learning little things like that seem small, but they made a world of difference. If someone invites you for lunch, you don't stay for an hour, you stay all night. And, so you just really have to adjust your idea of time and how much you're going to, quote unquote, accomplish that day, and so those things really helped in kind of getting down and getting to know them. Yeah,
it makes a big difference when you understand the culture around you. But
definitely.
it can be a very steep learning curve to get outside of your own worldview and your own lenses that you see everything and just understand everything from other people's points of view.
Right. There's a good portion where you feel like you took off your glasses and you're just blind. Right. No one has handed you a new set of glasses.
Yeah. So you worked with high school students. You mentioned Bible camps as well.
Yeah.
What were those like working with kids?
Yeah. So the summers are pretty much just camp from start to finish. Kind of you're on the job 24 hours a day, which is great, but also exhausting. And usually that looks like an English camp is something like an American Vacation Bible School, except that there's also the focus on English. So a lot of times we have a short-term team come in from the States, and they'll work with the locals and put on a camp. And it's a day camp for the kids. Usually it'll go up through, sometimes through high school, but usually not. There's only usually a couple kids that are in that age range. But yeah, you'll have your different parts of the day. So you have like your opening worship, and you have English lessons, and you have Bible lessons, and you have music, free time and snacks and all of that stuff. As the hosting people, as the missionaries, there's a lot of kind of behind the scenes work that happens. And when the short-term teams come, then you have orientation with them for a couple of days, let them kind of see the sites and get adjusted to the time zone and everything. And then usually you go, or myself and other missionaries will then visit all of the camps. So you're kind of driving cross country to check in on each of the camps, put out any fires, help them with anything, support them, encourage them, especially in the middle of the week, they're getting tired. And then once the camps wrap up, then you have like a debriefing with them, and you send them on the planes, and then you turn around and do it all over again with the next set that comes. But it's great. And this past summer was really busy, but it was awesome.
We have just a little bit of time left, just a couple of minutes. The question, the $1 million question we ask, I think every missionary that comes through, you learn about the language, you learn many of the the customs and learn about the culture. And one significant part of the culture is the food.
Yep.
What was the highlight of the food that you loved, and what was you were a little bit slower to adopt?
Well, I think I'll start with the second. The food is very hearty. It's very, very filling. You know, there's a lot of like goulash and bread and dumplings and stews, and it's very heavy. But you do so much walking that, you know, you kind of feel less guilty eating it. But in the winter, I'd say it's good winter food. You know, you feel like it keeps you warm. In the summer, it feels really heavy. And they eat a lot. And they eat their biggest meal in the middle of the day, and it lasts forever. So that was something that was a kind of a big adjustment for me. Not as many vegetables as I think are in our diet, surprisingly. So there'll be like pea soup or something, but you're not going to have like a side of mixed vegetables or something like that. Something that was nice is they have like coffee and cake like every day. Ooh. Yeah, and it's not like a super rich cake, but you know, like a less sweet kind of just accent to the coffee. And I'm a huge coffee drinker, so that was like a great time to like sit and visit with people and share different kinds of cakes. They have so many different words for cake in Czech, and they thought it was really weird that we only have cake. So like, so what kind of cake? I'm like, I don't know, it's cake. Yeah, but meal times are a huge thing in their culture, and I really appreciated that, and learned to appreciate the meal and not just kind of, okay, eating is something I have to do before I get to the next thing. It's really a good time to sit and visit with people.
My very limited exposure to Czech culture comes from my years in Texas, where there's a huge Czech
naturally
influence. Yes. So yeah, that's where my understanding. So it sounds like you learned a lot while you were there, and were able to serve in many ways, and have a new assignment. Your time in Czech Republic is coming to a close. You'll be serving in Eastern Europe, doing maybe some teaching as well.
Yep. A lot of teaching, a lot of work, doing stuff with the Pregnancy Resource Center, working with young women who are former orphans, a lot of creating and implementing youth work. So there's a lot of stuff coming up. I'm really excited about it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being our guest on the Coffee Hour today. Sarah
for having
Harms,
me.
serving the Lord in the Czech Republic. Thanks for being our guest on the Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Gulseth.
The Coffee Hour with Andy and Sarah is a production of KFUO. To support the Coffee Hour and KFUO Radio, visit KFUO.org. You can also text KFUO to 41444 or send an email to gifts@KFUO.org. And you can call us at 800-844-0524. KFUO. Christ for you, anytime, anywhere.